Okay, good morning, guys. Take out your notebooks. Bad news is I'm lecturing. The good news is it's super long. As in, I might not finish in one class period. I'm deeply, deeply sorry for you, but not for you guys, because you all suck. This is what I'm going to post on YouTube. Your faces aren't in it. I'm going to try to make this lecture as interactive as possible, but I'm not going to overdo it because I don't want it to get obnoxiously long, which may be unavoidable. So the purpose of today's lecture is for me to give you a preface for some reading which you're going to do in Strayer. It's not a lot. It's posted on the calendar. Tomorrow's going to be a reading day, and you're welcome to do the reading at home if you prefer to read at home, but it's all going to be due Wednesday night, so tomorrow night. I'm going to give you a lecture to contextualize it so you can understand the Strayer reading. You'll notice in the homework calendar, like it tells you to read, I want to say about 12 pages maybe from Strayer, and then underneath that it has some optional reading. The optional reading truly is optional. At no point am I going to give you a test where you gotta be able to recall facts from the book. However, the optional reading I've divided into topics, and if the country that you're studying has something to do with some of the optional topics in chapter 24 of Strayer, then you can read it. So only if it applies to your country, do the optional reading. Okay, enough said, let's go ahead and get started. Before I start yapping away, if you would, please take a look at this statement of fact, and then I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this country, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this question with absolutely no expectations that you get it right, nor will I tell you if you're right or wrong. I'm just going to ask you to throw out some ideas. Those of you at home, same thing. Just in case it doesn't show up in the video well, I'm going to read this statement out and this question out. There's 5 of you in here. Be thinking about this. Okay, so statement of fact. The militarization of Kennan's containment policy after 1949 led to brinksmanship, which was believed to achieve sustainable peace through mutually assured destruction. All of the terms that I've underlined in red, I expect you to know them now. Second, it'd probably be a good idea if they showed up in your presentations when you talk about the causation of your country's poverty. Okay, so the big question, and the question that I'm answering in the long lecture today, is how will this change the relationship between the first and second world with the third world? Did I phrase that right? How will this change the relationship? Yeah, I just said it weird. Right. When we militarize the ideological conflict between the US and the USSR, when the Russians learn to split the atom and they weaponize it, how is that going to affect the United States and the Soviet Union's relationship with third world countries? All right, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to collect your thoughts and then just throw out ideas. I'm going to ask everybody to propose an idea. Don't worry about being right, and I'm not even going to tell you if you're right or wrong. I just want you thinking. So a couple minutes to come up with an idea. I'm being quiet now. You at home should be thinking of answers now, too. Okay, so if the whole class was here, I'd actually give you more time than this. I'd put you in groups and ask you to come up with a hypothesis. But we are pressed for time. Lynn, I'm going to start with you. We're going to go in clockwise fashion. Please don't worry about being right. What do you think? When they start building up those nukes that you saw in Isao Hashimoto's video, you remember with all the explosions and everything, how is that going to change the relationship that the US and the USSR have with the third world countries? hypothesis in the back of your head. Mr. Hashimoto?
I'm thinking that because of the nuclear, they're eventually going to like create a strong side between side America and side USSR. So eventually, it might cause everyone to like either you must take a side and you must take a side in order to survive, or like you might end up being in the middle or like the neutral side, where then you will be like sort of kind of left behind because you don't have that support from the U.S. or the USSR.
Mr. Phil?
Since first or second world countries now have more nukes, it could lead to third world countries allying themselves with those first or second world countries, leading to more support of those third world countries.
Welcome back, sir. Jess X?
I think the third world countries wouldn't be that supportive of the first and second worlds because of the moves and the threat that the first and second worlds pose to them.
Helen?
Basically agreeing with Dwayne. So basically, since the nuclear weapon is so powerful, the third world country might feel a threat, and it's easier for them to select their position, like whether they're with US or with USSR. So it's easier for them to like turn into first world country or something.
Okay. I'm not going to weigh in. I do want to say I am genuinely impressed. You guys are firing on all mental cylinders this morning. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Those were fantastic answers. Way beyond my expectations. So much smarter than the kids at home. So much smarter. All right, so you should be thinking of answers too. The five speculations that you just heard right now were quite good. And now it's my turn to answer the question. It's a big question with a complicated answer. Ergo, we got a long one. Okay. So you're looking at a map of the world divided politically and economically during the Cold War. So this is one way to divide up all the countries during the Cold War from 1946 to 1991. The yellow countries are communist with the Soviet Union as the lead. They are the second world countries. The first world countries in green are the liberal democracies. These are those countries that follow free market capitalism and have some kind of political system that resembles democracy. The third world countries are in red, and they are a mix of everything. However, the third world countries are not aligned to the United States or liberal democracy exclusively, nor are they aligned to the USSR or to the political economic system of communism. Now let's get one thing straight right now, and this is really important. When I say third world country, Taka, what is your simple definition? What is a third world country to you?
Basically, it's a less developed country, technologically developed.
All right, let's just keep it as simple as possible. It's the poor countries, right? That's what you're describing. Right, so Taka was given a more technical definition, but just to keep it real simple, when I say third world countries, you hear poor countries, and that is an incorrect use of the term. Third world countries does not mean poor countries, but that tended to be the case. So let me show you another map. You've seen this before. Your final exam is based around this map. What are you looking at, Sean?
Global north and global south.
Good man. This is known as the North-South divide. Sean is correct. The blue countries are?
Global north.
The red countries are?
Global south.
Oh, Sean, you think you're so smart. Australia's in the south. Explain that, sir. Oh, and by the way, so is Singapore. And by the way, so is that country, but I don't know what it is. Guyana, Suriname? I don't know. What's up with that, dude? Why do you have global north countries in the south? And in the case of New Zealand and Australia, way south. Anybody got an explanation? Okay, so there is one. The line that divides them is known as the Grant Line. When we say global north and global south, please understand that the reason that those terms exist is because usually, you want to call it a rule of thumb, feel free, there's a line of latitude called 34 degrees north. It runs approximately through here. It goes through South Korea, I miss South Korea. It goes through Japan and think about that. So the idea is, for the most part, and there are some notable outliers, any country that touches the 34-degree north parallel or is north of that line has a much higher probability of being one of the wealthier countries, whereas countries to the south of that, to a very large extent, as you can see, tend to be part of the global south. And that's why we use those two terms. But 34 or 30 degrees north, it's either 30 or 34 degrees north. You need to be super accurate. You can look it up online. But that's where those terms come from. The whole system that you're seeing right now is called the North-South Divide. And please note that it is highly debatable in June 9th, 2020, if the People's Republic of China is actually part of the global south. This is just a mistake. Some blue ink fell in the water here. I am making no political statement. It's not my map. Please don't fire me. Okay, so first things first, I want to talk about where this came from. First things first. Helen, state the obvious. What is a very clear similarity between a map of the first, second, and third world and a map of the North-South Divide? I'm going to go back and forth a couple times and then you spit out the answer. What is the similarity between these two maps? Recognizing, I'm stalling a little bit, recognizing that the Cold War map divides the world into three parts. The economic North-South divide divides the world into two parts. What similarity do you see between the two? Helen John.
Most third world countries are the global south countries.
Okay, so that's it. Like, what's that about? Why is it that the third world countries tend now to be the global south countries? How come these countries that didn't align themselves to the US or the USSR, why are they the poor countries now? And to answer that question, you really got to go back to the 19th century, but I'm not doing that. We'll be here all day. So instead, let's go back to the coast of Canada in 1941 in the Atlantic Ocean on board the USS Augusta. Ling, what happened in 1941 on board the USS Augusta in the Atlantic Ocean? Ling, you're on fire. Who are these two old white guys? I'm sorry, where? All white people look the same? God. Jess X.
FTR on the left and Churchill on the right.
Very good. Leader of what?
US.
Leader of what?
Very good.
Okay. So the leader of the United States of America, and just for the purpose of where I'm going with this, let's say the leader of the British Empire, right? And you'll see why in just a moment. Taka, use that big brain of yours to tell me what's significant about the discussion between these two men on the Atlantic Ocean on the USS Augusta in 1941.
I think it was like Churchill was afraid that his Britain wasn't able to defend against the Nazis, so he just wanted to go to FDR, but FDR just kind of blackmailed him and saying that like the empire should basically end.
Man, you guys are on fire today. All right, so you know it is the Atlantic Charter. Everything Taka said is right, so if you're taking notes, write down what he just said. Now, let me emphasize, for the purpose of today's lecture, what I think you need to know. Number one, Roosevelt says, we will save you, Britain, from the big bad wolf that is Adolf Hitler. In exchange, when the war is over, nobody's country or empire gets bigger. Nobody's. Nobody gets any land. Nobody. Because when you take land after war, it creates future wars. Number two, all nations that have a common language, ethnicity, and especially a shared history, but especially a shared tragic history, who have lived on a piece of land for centuries, now they get to draw a border around it, create a nation state. That concept is called self-determination, and as part of that, they get to draw a border around themselves and set up their own government. That's self-government. Okay, yay. Number three, we are all going to subscribe to free market capitalism. No more exploitive mercantilism. That means colonialism is dead. You may not have colonies. You may not exploit the resources and labor of those colonies. And fourth, and important to me as the director of the Model UN program, ex-director of the Model UN program, Ms. Sternin is now officially in charge, and Andy Kim is the Model UN president, by the way, just in case you're interested in such things. Anyway, particularly interesting to me as a Model UN guy is the fourth agreement is when the war is over, we are going to replace the League of Nations with something better. You know it as the United Nations. We are going to make decisions together from many sides so that we rule the planet together. And rule is probably not the best term. Okay, let's get more interesting. Here's a cartoon made in 1943, and that's important that it's made in 1943 because the Atlantic Charter, the agreement between Roosevelt and Churchill made in 1941, was a secret. Nobody knew that it existed outside the people upon that ship because the United States was not part of World War II. The United States did not want to be part of World War II. A couple of months later, after the Atlantic Charter Agreement was made between Roosevelt and Churchill, Japan surprise attacked Pearl Harbor, and so did the beginning of many conspiracy theories that said Franklin Delano Roosevelt knew that Pearl Harbor was going to happen, and that he allowed it to happen so that he could put into effect the Atlantic Charter. I do not believe that conspiracy theory, but if any of you guys ever get into conspiracy theories or World War II military history, you will run into it. The idea that Roosevelt needed something to happen to get America involved in the war because he made this deal. He wanted to create a United Nations. He wanted to end empire, but the American people and the American Congress did not want to fight another world war, especially one based in Europe. Roosevelt did want to fight. It is interesting to note that once America got involved in World War II, we were much less interested in attacking the empire of Japan, and most of our energy and resources went into attacking Europe, because the idea was if we can free Europe of fascism, we'll be able to create a new world order that's based on capitalism, the United Nations, and the death of empire. You got Ms. Sternin next year for U.S. history, so here's a little preview of it. This is a cartoon made in 1943, 2 years after. Take a look at it. You guys do the same. I'm going to be quiet for 60 seconds. Tell me if you can see what's going on. Please note at the top and the information at the bottom. The bottom it says a second Emancipation Proclamation. At the top it says 2 years ago today, President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill signed the Atlantic Charter. You got 60 seconds to figure out everything going on there. If this image is blurry on YouTube, you can download the PowerPoint and look at it. As an added bonus, if anybody hits an intellectual home run right now. When I'm done teaching this morning, I will go to Miss Sternin and say, you know who's going to be a great student next year? So-and-so. All right, let's do it. What's the comparison and what does the comparison mean? You got to know a little bit of U.S. history, and I don't know if you do. Are there any American citizens in here? If you're an American citizen, please play with the Rubik's Cube right now. You are American, aren't you? You are American, Link. Don't lie to me. Sean?
No.
No, you're not. Doesn't your mom speak like crazy good English?
She grew up in America. I'm Catholic.
Busted, buddy. You're going down for your crimes. Taka? Let's start off simple. Who's the ghost?
I'm guessing it's Lincoln.
What did Lincoln do? What is the most important thing Lincoln did as president?
He signed something that basically free the states.
Okay.
Yeah.
So arguably the most important thing that Abraham Lincoln did was he freed the slaves, especially in the time of the George Floyd protest going right now, to free the slaves. Another plausible answer to that question would have been he kept the American country together. He saved the Union. He kept the southern countries from creating their own country because that's what they tried to do. Okay. Taka said he freed the slaves, and that's probably the best answer to understand this cartoon. Taka, what's the connection between Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves and the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 and Roosevelt and Churchill signing the Atlantic Charter in 1941?
Basically, saving the world from fascism to Lincoln saving the world, saving America.
Not bad. Close. Close. All right, so the analogy is Lincoln ended slavery, and perhaps it is the United States' responsibility to end slavery. Roosevelt is ending colonialism, and colonialism is a form of slavery. So in this meeting, I love Churchill looking up at the ghost. You suck. You suck, ghost of Lincoln. So in this meeting, and I made this point before, so I won't belabor the point, but Churchill signs away the British Empire. And that's not insignificant. The British Empire in 1939, when World War II starts, is the superpower of the world. The world superpower right now is the United States of America. During the Cold War, it was the USA and the USSR. But before my country and the Soviet Union rose to prominence, this was it, baby. Economically, militarily, particularly with their navy, this was the world's single greatest power, and he's signing it away. He's saying that empire ends today, the British Empire agrees to end their empire, and will help you end all other empires. Not insignificant. Okay, so let's talk about some basic facts here. The Soviet Union beat Germany. You saw the video, the fall in World War II. You saw the facts yourself. The Soviet Union beat Hitler. The United States of America defeated the Empire of Japan. Both communism and liberal democracy rejected colonialism. They felt that owning colonies was bad because it was a form of slavery. Both countries and ideological systems support equality and freedom, but in very different ways. I'm not going to talk about this too much because we'll get sucked into it, but here's just some interesting philosophical terms for you to chew on. The definition of equality is different for a communist than it is from someone who subscribes to liberal democracy. For a communist, equality is known as equality of outcome. Everybody gets the same thing. In my country, and in countries that subscribe to free market capitalism, equality is defined as equality of
Opportunity.
woohoo! Jessica, how did you know that? That's just in the brain somewhere for unknown reasons? Okay, so there's two kinds of equality. There's equality of outcome and there's equality of opportunity. Equality of outcome, everybody ends with the same thing. Equality of opportunity, everybody has an equal chance of success. Right now, my country is burning because the black community and a large part of the other racial communities that make up the United States are saying, we do not have equality of opportunity. If you are born with black skin, you do not have the same chance for success. It's very different than what the communists are. Okay, so now let's talk about liberty. Both countries believe in freedom, but they have different definitions. For a communist, it is freedom from want. No one will be a slave to the need for shelter, for food, or for clothing. And being a slave to basic wants is really being a slave. I mean, there's no misery quite like poverty. So it's freedom from poverty, freedom from want, or freedom from need, maybe more accurate. On the other hand, the Americans, when they talk about liberty, they're really more than anything else talking about freedom from tyranny. It's this whole enlightened concept that we're born with all of these freedoms and they can't be taken away by a government or anybody else. Okay, let's move on. So we're talking about liberty and equality. We're starting with equality. At its very, very, very best, the New World Order that started in 1945 was based on liberty and it was based on equality. Equality was achieved in 1945 in the summer in San Francisco, California, at this meeting right here. This is where the UN Charter was signed. Please note that at the beginning of the UN Charter, it says the following. Note the use of the term equality. So global equality achieved. Now let's talk about this. Some years after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was issued, all countries have signed on to this. When we talk about the concept of human rights, we're talking about freedoms that are guaranteed to everybody around the world, no matter what country you subscribe to, if you are a member of the United Nations. And please note that just about all countries on earth are a member of the United Nations. So the UN Charter establishes global equality. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights establishes freedom. And here they are. This is what the Declaration of Human Rights says. When we talk about the concept of human rights, like that's a human rights violation, this is what's being violated. I'll shut up, you guys read. Both the communists and the capitalists both agree on this one. This is, in a way, a form of colonialism. Freedom of movement, freedom of thought and belief. This is something that the Americans would have proposed. This is freedom from tyranny. Number 5, this is something the communists would have proposed. This is freedom from want, freedom from need, freedom from abject poverty that makes you a slave to your basic needs. So you can see a hybrid of both philosophies coming together in the creation of the Declaration of Human Rights, signed in 1948. Okay, so now we're going to go on to something else. This time instead we're going to talk about old white men. Only kidding. We only talk about old white men. Take a look at this image for just a moment. I'm not going to ask you any questions. I just want you to look at it and memorize it briefly. Ling, don't be racist. I'm having way too much fun teasing you today. Okay, now let's talk about what you're looking at. So this is the Bretton Woods system, 1944. You looked at it. I'm about to talk about macroeconomics. It's going to get a little boring, so I'm going to talk fast so you don't fall asleep. At the Bretton Woods Conference, two things were created. The International Monetary Fund, usually called the IMF, and the second thing is called the World Bank. The World Bank is not its real name, but it's the name we'll use because that's what everyone calls it. So two things were created, the IMF and the World Bank. The question is, what does the IMF do? Answer is, they stabilize, they stabilize the exchange rates between currencies. They make sure that there are not huge fluctuations between the Chinese renminbi, the US dollar, the British pound, the euro, and all the other currencies used throughout the world. If one currency all of a sudden starts getting real wonky, like losing its value, the IMF comes in and gives immediate and emergency loans to those countries. The most stable currency on earth is the US dollar. The IMF does all of its transactions in US dollars. Have you ever noticed, if you ever Google something like how rich is so-and-so country, the answer is always in US dollars? The reason that the answer is always in US dollars is because the IMF pegs everything to the US dollar. So if they're trying to answer the question, oh, has the Japanese yen gotten like crazy on the exchange rate, on the foreign exchange market? To answer that question, they're like, well, what is its value to the US dollar? How has that changed? They do that for all currency. Everything is calculated in relation to the US dollar. Okay, next. So what does the World Bank do? Real simple. If you go to the World Bank's Facebook page, this is what you see. The World Bank gives loans to the Global South. They give loans to the Global South to invest in themselves and ways to improve their economy. Your quarter 4 exam is all about you solving the economic problems of the country you've chosen to study. At some point, you're going to need capital. You're going to need money to invest in certain improvement plans in your country. Where do you get that money from? You can get it from a few places, but one of the first places to start is the World Bank. Created in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference, the World Bank exists to give the country that you're studying money so that they can create different things. I'm using the word things, a very nondescript term, consciously, because I want you to tell me what the things are that your country should invest in. The World Bank is not a magical unicorn that farts out money. It's more complicated than that. You're going to need money from other places. You're going to think about how to invest the money. But the World Bank and the Bretton Woods system needs to be part of the conversation on your exam.